Members of the jury, the 29th of July 2023 lunch was arranged by the accused. Each of the guests were there by her invitation. She alone chose what to cook, obtained the ingredients, and prepared the meal.
Today, Nanette Rogers rose to her feet and started summarising the prosecution case against alleged mushroom cook murderer Erin Patterson. The heart of her argument was what she called Erin's 4 calculated deceptions. Her summation lasted all day, but we're here to break it all down. I'm Brooke Grebert-Craig, and this is The Mushroom Cook. It's day 32, week 8 of Erin Patterson's murder trial, and I'm here with my colleague, court reporter Laura Placella. It was a full-on day in court today, wasn't it, Laura?
Yeah, it really was. We all enjoyed a nice long weekend with the trial not sitting on Friday, but we returned today for a really jam-packed day. As you mentioned at the top of the episode, Crown Prosecutor Nanette Rogers today started delivering her closing address. This is really her chance to summarise the prosecution's case, especially considering the jury ended up hearing 7 weeks of evidence. So there was a lot Dr. Rogers had to get through today. And she did that by breaking down the evidence into 4 categories. And she called these Erin's 4 calculated deceptions. The first, she said, was her fabricated cancer claim that she used as a reason for the lunch. The second was the lethal doses of poison she secreted in the beef Wellingtons. The third was her attempts to make it seem like she also suffered from death cap mushroom poisoning. And the fourth was the sustained cover-up she embarked on to conceal the truth.
Let's start with the first one, the fabricated cancer claim Erin used as a reason for the lunch. Dr. Rogers said Erin lied about having cancer in order to provide her lunch guests with a reason to attend. Dr. Rogers said it was rare for Erin to invite people to her home. In particular, when inviting her estranged husband, Simon Patterson, Dr. Rogers said Erin gave him multiple incentives to attend, painting the picture of a gathering which was not only social but was also about important family business.
Dr. Rogers then took the jury to Ian's evidence, who said that while they were sitting around the table, Erin told them that she had been diagnosed with cancer. And he rejected the possibility that Erin only told them that she had a possible diagnosis. In his evidence, he actually said that Erin discussed with them the possibility of chemotherapy. She said with Ian's evidence, the jury could completely reject Erin's claim that she never told the guests she had a cancer diagnosis.
Dr. Rogers said Erin planted the seed of this lie far in advance when she told Don and Gail before the lunch she was having medical tests on her elbow. Dr. Rogers said this was all a fabrication since there was no lump on her elbow. These are Dr. Rogers' words read by our voice actor.
These lies were detailed. She was setting up a fiction that she was facing a serious health issue. She knew how to tell convincing lies when it came to the cancer because she had put in the research.
It was at this point that Dr. Rogers referred to the screenshots that were extracted from Erin's tablet detailing ovarian cancer symptoms. She then reminded the jury of the evidence of intensive care specialist Professor Andrew Burton, who confirmed that Erin had never received a cancer diagnosis. This is something that Erin has also conceded. This is what Dr. Rogers said today.
And of course, here in court, the accused agreed she'd never been diagnosed with cancer. You might be wondering, why on earth would she tell such a lie? Well, the prosecution says that the accused never thought she would have to account for this lie. She did not think her lunch guests would live to reveal it. Her lie would die with them.
Moving on now to the prosecution's second calculated deception, the lethal doses of poison Erin secreted in the beef Wellingtons.
This is the critical deception that the prosecution alleges against her, that she deliberately sought out and located death cap mushrooms and then secreted lethal doses of those deadly mushrooms into the individual beef Wellingtons she had made for the lunch guests. At the same time, she made sure she would not suffer the same fate as her lunch guests by making herself an individual beef Wellington that did not contain any death cap mushrooms. The sinister deception was to use a nourishing meal as the vehicle to deliver a deadly poison.
Dr. Rogers said Erin used a beef Wellington recipe from a Recipe Tin Eats cookbook that did not call for individual beef Wellingtons. She said she deviated from the recipe to enable her to control what ingredients went into what serve. Dr. Rogers said it was the only way that Erin could ensure that she would not accidentally consume any death cap mushrooms.
It was at this point that Dr. Rogers then took the jury to the source of the death cap mushrooms. She conceded that the prosecution had no direct evidence of where they came from, but she reminded them that Erin was aware of citizen science website iNaturalist that could be used to track down the toxic fungi. She told the jury that Erin had this knowledge because her computer records showed that in May 2022, a year before the lunch, someone in her house had searched for iNaturalist on this device. Erin told the jury last week that while she didn't remember making this search, it was very possible that it could have been her. Dr. Rogers went on to say that beyond knowing about this website, Erin also had the opportunity to source death cap mushrooms before the lunch because 2 sightings were logged on the website in Loch and Outram on April 18 and May 21 in 2023. We won't comb back through the evidence of digital forensics expert Dr. Matthew Sorrell, but he said that Erin's phone records showed a possible visit to Loch on April 28 and possible visits to Loch and Outram on May 22, when Erin did not usually visit these areas. From here, Dr. Rogers laid out a timeline for the jury. She said that the prosecution alleges that after finding death caps in Loch on April 28, Erin travelled back to Leongatha to buy a dehydrator. She said she made this purchase for the purpose of dehydrating the death caps she had found. The jury were taken back to the photos of mushrooms on a dehydrator tray in Erin's kitchen. One set of photos showed regular button mushrooms, while another set of photos showed yellow-tinged mushrooms. Dr. Rogers explained that it was the prosecution case that Erin was doing a test run with the button mushrooms to make sure that she wouldn't waste the death caps she also wanted to dehydrate and preserve. Dr. Rogers told the jury that after dehydrating the death caps, Erin later returned to Loch and Outram on May 22, looking for more. She then said it was open for the jury to infer that at some stage after, she blitzed the death caps into a powder to be able to hide them in the beef Wellington meal.
Dr. Rogers then moved on to the different coloured plates. She told the jury that Ian was a compelling witness who gave clear evidence that Erin served her 4 guests on one type of plate and herself on another. Here's what Dr. Rogers said today.
He had a clear memory of exactly what was served at the lunch, the individual, wholly encased, pasty-type beef Wellington, mashed potato and green beans. You will have no trouble in being satisfied that he is a reliable witness, and you can confidently accept what he told you about the details of the lunch, including the 4 grey plates and the 5th odd plate.
Dr. Rogers told the jury that Erin deliberately served herself on a different plate to the others in order to identify which of the meals was not poisoned. She said the only reason she would do this was because she knew there were poisonous mushrooms in the meals, because she had put them there. To summarise the second calculated deception, Dr. Rogers said that the evidence showed Erin had the knowledge to locate death cap mushrooms, the opportunity to source them at a time proximate to the lunch, the knowledge, skill and equipment to dehydrate them and then blitz them into a powder, and complete control over the ingredients of the meal to make sure she did not accidentally consume death cap mushrooms.
Let's move on to the third calculated deception, Erin's attempts to make it seem like she also suffered death cap mushroom poisoning. Dr. Rogers said Erin did this to disguise her crimes.
What that evidence shows is that the accused, over a number of days, deliberately and falsely represented to family members and medical personnel, both by her words and actions, that she was very unwell as a result of the lunch. Of course, the only reason she would do something like that, pretend to be suffering from the same illness as the others, is because she knew she hadn't been poisoned. She knew she was not going to exhibit symptoms of poisoning, and she knew how suspicious this would look to everyone. Her good health, in other words, would give her away about what she had done, so she had to try and look unwell like the others.
Dr. Rogers broke down this deception day by day and first focused on the night of the lunch on July 29. Erin told the doctor that on that night she was experiencing explosive diarrhea every 10 minutes. But Dr. Rogers told the jury today that Erin still drove her son's friend home that very same evening. She told the court, "You might think a person who genuinely fears pooing her pants potentially in front of her son and his friend would not have taken such a risk." Dr. Rogers then moved on to the next day, July 30, which was when Erin drove her son to his flying lesson in Taiab. Erin told the jury last week that on their way to Taiab, she had to pull over because she needed to go to the toilet and ended up going to the toilet in a bush. She said she cleaned herself up with some tissues that she placed in a dog poo bag. However, Erin's son told an investigator that he did not remember them making any stops on their way to Taiab. The jury has previously heard that they stopped at a BP service station, and CCTV shows Erin entering the toilet in the store before exiting 9 seconds later. But Dr. Rogers told the jury today that it would take more than 9 seconds for Erin to clean herself up or at a minimum wash her hands after going to the toilet on the side of the road. She said it was very unlikely that Erin would have chosen to take a 2-hour round car trip for an entirely optional activity on a day she claims to have been suffering diarrhea. She said the prosecution case was she did not have diarrhea at all on that day.
Dr. Rogers then moved on to July 31 and the evidence that Dr. Chris Webster gave to the jury. He said that he spoke to Erin when she arrived at Leongatha Hospital and informed her that she had potentially been exposed to death caps. Dr. Rogers told the jury this was the moment that Erin realised what she had done had not gone undetected. She said her reaction was that she wanted to leave the hospital and did so after 5 minutes.
She fled back to her house to try and work out how she was going to manage the situation and how she might explain why she wasn't sick like the lunch guests. Of course, she could only have felt comfortable walking out of the hospital, not receiving any of the life-saving treatment that doctors were telling her was necessary and time-critical, because she knew very well that she had not eaten death cap mushrooms.
Erin was then transferred from Leongatha Hospital to Monash Medical Centre, where she stayed overnight. The next day, on August 1, Erin told Dr. Laura Muldoon that she was feeling okay, and Dr. Muldoon told the jury in her evidence that Erin was displaying no signs of death cap mushroom poisoning. Dr. Rogers said in total, Erin spent just over 24 hours in hospital receiving treatment, but not one medical professional observed her appearing unwell. It was at this point that Dr. Rogers compared Erin's symptoms to those of the lunch guests. She said that by August 1, all 4 lunch guests had been conveyed to the Austin Hospital and were in the ICU on life support in an advanced state of multiple organ failure, meaning their organs were essentially shutting down. But she reiterated that this was the same day that Erin was allowed to go home.
Dr. Rogers told the jury Erin's story about how much of her beef Wellington portion she ate kept changing because she was trying to manufacture an explanation for why she wasn't as ill as her guests. Erin initially told medical staff she had eaten about half of her meal. Her account later shifted to 1/3 or even as little as a quarter. Dr. Rogers said it was the prosecution's case that Erin was not sick because she didn't eat any amount of death cap mushrooms. Finally, let's talk about the prosecution's 4th calculated deception, the sustained cover-up Erin embarked on to conceal the truth.
When you examine the evidence of what the accused said and did following the lunch, and particularly as it was realised that the lunch guests had consumed death cap mushrooms, you will see that the accused lied and acted deceptively in other ways to deflect blame and suspicion about what she'd done. This specifically includes 4 things.
As she had all day, Dr. Rogers went on to break down those 4 things. She said the cover-up included Erin lying about feeding her children leftovers of the beef Wellington with the mushroom scraped off, her lying about the mushrooms in the beef Wellington coming from Woolworths and an Asian grocer, her disposing of her dehydrator at the tip after using it to dehydrate death caps, and deliberately concealing her usual phone from police. When it came to the lie about the leftovers, Dr. Rogers said that this was a lie Erin told over multiple days to multiple people, including family members, doctors, nurses, child protection workers, and Department of Health advisors. Erin's son recounted that the night after the lunch, his mum spoke to him about Don and Gail's illnesses and said that she thought it might have been the lunch. The jury has previously heard that Erin told doctors she went to hospital because she thought she had a case of food poisoning. But Dr. Rogers questioned why Erin would feed her children leftovers of the beef Wellington meal, considering all of this. Here's what she said in court today.
The accused later told Dr. Laura Muldoon that she had not presented to hospital before the Monday morning, 31st of July, as she thought she had a case of food poisoning and had children with her at home yesterday, Sunday. Why then would the accused feed the leftovers of a meal to her children, knowing it had, or even believing it might have, led to the hospitalisation of 4 people, and on her own account, her own illness? In particular, why would she feed them the meat portion of that meal, which, if she didn't know the mushrooms were the issue, would be the more obvious suspect for any food poisoning? There is no reason to doubt that the children did eat steak, mashed potato, and beans on Sunday night, but it certainly was not the steak that had been cooked in mushroom paste and pastry the day before.
Dr. Rogers went on to say that after Erin was told her children needed urgent treatment, she didn't want to take them out of school because she didn't want to hassle them. Dr. Rogers said that was an extraordinary response from a mother. She said that Erin's reluctance to have them brought to the hospital for medical assessment stemmed from the fact she knew they had not consumed death cap mushrooms.
One would expect a potentially life-threatening danger to her children would have galvanised the accused's interactions on their behalf. But, of course, there is a perfectly reasonable explanation for why the accused, a doting mother as you have heard, was reluctant to have her children medically assessed. She knew they had not eaten death cap mushrooms at all. Her reluctance to have her children medically assessed is another piece of conduct by the accused, which, we say, is incriminating conduct.
Erin told the jury last week that she scraped off the mushrooms and the pastry from the 6 beef Wellington she had prepared before giving it to her children. But Dr. Rogers said today that the scientific evidence strongly suggested that simply scraping off the mushrooms would not have been enough to prevent the children from ingesting the toxins from the death caps if they were in the 6th serve. Here's what she said.
The meat from that dish carried beta-amanitin in it, even when a forensic toxicologist tried to extract the meat portion for analysis, it could not be entirely separated from the mushroom paste. It is impossible, we suggest to you, that the accused could have served up a piece of leftover steak with all of the poisonous mushrooms or mushroom paste removed. Not even a forensic toxicologist managed to do that in a laboratory.
Let's move on to the second point of the 4th deception. Erin lying about all the mushrooms in the beef Wellington coming from Woolworths and an Asian grocer. Dr. Rogers said this is a lie for 3 reasons. Number 1, her story about the Asian grocer kept changing. Number 2, she was not forthcoming with the Department of Health. And number 3, death caps are highly unlikely to appear on store shelves.
Dr. Rogers did really make a lot of numbered points today, so we hope you're all following along. But when talking about the first reason of the second point of her 4th deception, Dr. Rogers said that Erin's story about the Asian grocer evolved between July 31 and August 2. Dr. Rogers ran through the testimony of almost a dozen witnesses, particularly around what they said Erin told them about the location of the Asian grocer. Erin told Dr. Webster at Leongatha Hospital on July 31 that she bought all the mushrooms in the meal from Woolworths. 2.5 hours later at 10:30, she told Simon's brother Matthew Patterson that she also bought dried mushrooms from a Chinese grocer in the Oakley area. Around that time, she also spoke to Dr. Veronica Foote and said to her that the dried mushrooms came from a Chinese grocer in Melbourne. She didn't mention any suburbs. About 20 minutes later, she spoke to Dr. Connor McDermott from Austin Health, who said she bought button mushrooms from Woolworths and dried mushrooms from a Chinese grocer in Oakley. She also mentioned at this point that the grocer may have been in Glen Waverley. At 2:40 p.m, she told 2 paramedics that the dried mushrooms came from an Asian grocer in Melbourne. When she got to Monash Medical Centre, she told Dr. Muldoon at 4 p.m. that the dried mushrooms may have come from an Asian grocer in Glen Waverley. Finally, 2 hours later, at 6 p.m, she told Public Health Director Rhonda Stewart that the dried mushrooms may have come from an Asian grocer in Oakley or Glen Waverley. But Dr. Rogers said Erin's story continued to evolve the next day. She told Senior Public Health Advisor Sally Ann Atkinson that the dried mushrooms may have come from an Asian grocer in either Clayton, Mount Waverley or Oakley. Dr. Rogers said this was the first time Erin had mentioned Clayton or Mount Waverley. Later that day, she spoke to child protection worker Katrina Cripps and told her that the dried mushrooms may have come from an Asian grocer in Oakley or Clayton. But Dr. Rogers said she didn't mention Mount Waverley to Miss Cripps, despite mentioning it 6 hours earlier to Miss Atkinson. The next day, on August 2, Erin again spoke to Miss Atkinson and mentioned Oakley and Clayton, but did not mention Glen Waverley. In her last example, Dr. Rogers said that Erin spoke again to Miss Atkinson on August 3 and mentioned strip shopping in Oakley, but then this time mentioned Glen Waverley.
Okay, so that's a lot of suburbs, Laura. So let me summarise. She mentioned Oakley, Glen Waverley, Clayton and Mount Waverley.
And Melbourne as well at large, but different combinations it appears to different people. And this was something Dr. Rogers really wanted to make a point of. Here is what she told the jury.
Even if you could accept it is something you might not remember, you would think that if you were in a situation like this, for the sake of your very ill family members and for anyone else who might be exposed, you would do everything you could to try and remember the store. But the accused sat on her hands while Don, Gail, Ian and Heather were all in comas. She was slow to respond to the Department of Health, even totally non-responsive at times. And as time passed, her description of the Chinese food store shifted and grew broader.
Then Dr. Rogers described how remarkable Erin's memory was last week while she was giving evidence compared to her memory of the Asian grocer.
You might have noticed that when the accused was giving the evidence that she appeared to have a remarkable memory. She could recall dates, evidence and details easily as she was being asked questions over many days. Even now, in June 2025, she could recall that 28th of April 2023 was a Friday and not a Monday, as I had suggested to her in cross-examination. Yet on August the 13th, 2023, she could not recall the shop or even the suburb where she purchased the mushrooms from an Asian grocer in the same April of 2023. It simply beggars belief.
So Dr. Rogers will continue her closing address tomorrow, where she will cover the last 2 points of the fourth deception, those being that Erin disposed of the dehydrator and deliberately concealed her usual phone from police. We don't know how long Dr. Rogers' address will go on for after that, but once she's done, it will then be the defence's turn. Defence barrister Colin Mandy will also deliver a closing address to the jury. Erin is claiming that she may have accidentally added mushrooms she foraged into the meal with the dried mushrooms she purchased from the Asian grocer.
Thanks, Laura. See you tomorrow for another episode.
See you, Brooke.